You know, I just got back from a meeting, and while I was in the car, I was like thinking about this idea that how under Bitcoinized the world is. And this is a potential threat vector that if you are a Bitcoiner, you need to be aware of. And so I wrote down some notes about my strategy. I was kind of wondering whether I should put this video out there anyway. So I kind of want your feedback as to whether this is kind of a valuable topic to even talk about when it comes to Bitcoin. But I kind of wanted to give you an insight as to how traditional asset management and asset protection really works when it comes to Bitcoin. Because I think that a lot of people think that Bitcoin is creating this kind of this new world, and while it's creating a quote-unquote revolution when it comes to what pristine capital actually is, it is also open to a lot of risk factors that traditional assets and traditional wealth management have kind of already taken care of from traditional assets. So I wanted to go through this very quickly and just explain to you how you should potentially be thinking about asset protection. And yeah, so that's what I want to talk about. And again, these are the types of conversations that I think, you know, we need to start having, because really it's not about the Bitcoin you have, it's about the Bitcoin you get to keep and that you strategically do keep that actually matters over the long term. So, you know, when I look at, listen, the problem is this: the world is so under Bitcoinized that when they actually figure out how important Bitcoin is, the world is going to start thinking of ways to come get some Bitcoin. And really, that's what you want to hedge against. And there's multiple different risk factors. And unfortunately, to all the Bitcoin bros that say, I lost my Bitcoin in a boating accident, et cetera, you're going to end up in prison. Right? You got to think about this smartly. You got to start thinking, start elevating the thought process that's being had in Bitcoin outside of, you know, kind of like as if you're in some kind of football team and having a conversation in a locker room, right? Because unfortunately, you know, if you go through any of these threat processes here, you're going to end up in the legal system, and in the legal system, they're going to ask you for a full financial disclosure, and if you just lose your Bitcoin in a boating accident, then, you know, and then it's discovered because everything is on a blockchain that can be monitored, you're going to end up in prison. So we don't want to commit any fraud. The way I think about, you know, asset protection, wealth management is I want everything to be completely open, and I want, you know, if I'm compelled to talk about my assets, you know, then you could see everything. The legal systems that are, you know, out there are just going to protect me from you know, being able to defend against any type of frivolous lawsuits or anything like that. And I think this is quite important with Bitcoin. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why the ETFs coming out has been a very, very important thing, because that makes things a lot easier when it comes to the traditional asset management structures that have protected wealth for generations, right? This is not something new here that I'm going to talk about. This has been used in real estate, equities, gold, everything for generations to pass assets on, legacy planning and everything else. So really, let's get to it. And by the way, subscribe to the video, because subscribe to the channel, because, you know, these are the types of important conversations, because, you know, right, you know, getting to one Bitcoin is one thing, staying and keeping that one Bitcoin in the midst of this very, very dangerous world that we're going into, where everyone suddenly realizes that they're under Bitcoinized, is another thing, right? So these are the types of conversations that I think are important. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for that. And don't be a moron thinking that, okay, you know, I lost my Bitcoin in a boating accident is gonna protect you in any one of these threat vectors. So the way that I see threat vectors is like three prongs of threats, right, to any individual with assets. By the way, if you've got no assets, none of this is relevant. You can just be continuously happy, right? If you've got assets, you need to be professional about how you manage those assets and how you actually get around, you know, the right people that can actually help you figure out how to keep those assets, not only for yourself, but for generations to come, because that's what Bitcoin is. It is a once in a species opportunity, not just once in your lifetime opportunity, right? So really there's three areas of threat vector from a legal approach and perspective outside of just being hit over the head that you really need to think about and start thinking about how to protect against this. And really it's business or whatever income work that you're doing, and then personal, like a divorce, for example, is the main destroyer of wealth, and then state, right? If you've got an issue with the state, and really the state thing gets taken care of, most people are not going to have any issues with their state, but if there is an issue with the state, it's generally going to come from one of the other two not being resolved early on, right? So from a business perspective, you could be sued for anything nowadays, right? You're getting sued for, you say something wrong, or you do something wrong, or you fulfill a contract, it's not up to the standard, you're going to get sued. It could be any one of those things, any business or income, employment, like it could be anything, right? Like you could be sued for any reason from a business point of view. We all understand that. The next thing that people really don't think about is the personal side of it. And a lot of Bitcoiners are young, a lot of Bitcoiners are men, and a lot of Bitcoiners are going to get married and try and build a family because that is the next logical step after you have absolute perfect money. Problem is, 55% divorce rate worldwide is a big threat vector to your Bitcoin, and there's going to be a lot of predatory behavior. You can see a lot of predatory behavior at Bitcoin conferences if you've got your eyes open and you're not boozed up on alcohol 24/7 at these conferences. You can see a lot of predatory behavior already starting. That predatory behavior is going to be, I believe, the number one way that most people in Bitcoin that hold Bitcoin today are going to lose their Bitcoin. There's just no, what can you say? It is too powerful, right? So you want to hedge against the personal side of it. Majority of the time that's going to be divorce, could be family disputes, stuff like that, right? Just personal life shit. Or actually, another one, like you could be driving. I have a friend who's extremely wealthy and he refuses to drive a car now just because of everything that's going on. So he employed a driver just for a liability perspective. It's like the cost of the driver is taken care of in the potential liability that may happen if I was driving the car, right? So that's also a hedge and a threat vector for your Bitcoin. But I think the majority of the time it's going to be a divorce or something like that. And then you've got state, right? So really state for most people, you're not going to be under attack by the state. That's a very, very harsh actor that's coming at you, and the full resources of the state are being pushed in your direction. That's very, very burdensome, but there are still ways to hedge yourself against that. But most people, it's going to be, you have a business dispute, you have a personal dispute, you can't solve it talking it out or just trying to get a settlement done or whatever. You can't solve it like that, so then the state's going to have to get involved. All of these are threat vectors, and you must start. I want every Bitcoiner to take, we've got a quarter left for this year. You're about to, if you're not already, you're going to become extremely wealthy. And if you're wondering, why should I think about this? I have Bitcoin. I can just get on my Cold Card or my Ledger or my Trezor and just get on a plane and be somewhere else. Like, you're really not understanding how long-term wealth management is done. And I want to elevate that conversation because it's not going to work, right? You're going to get on, you got one passport, most of you. You're going to get on a plane and your passport's going to be frozen, and you're going to be either not be able to get on the plane or be sent back from wherever you landed because they're not going to let you in the country, right? So, I'm not going to talk about citizenships or anything like that. It's not in my expertise, but I do think it's very valuable to have multiple citizenships. So, and residencies. Residencies are more important than citizenships and kind of easier to get as well. But that's a whole different conversation. So, you've got these three threat vectors coming for your Bitcoin. By the way, what happens when all of these people, right, business, personal, and state, all of these threat vectors realize that they are under Bitcoinized, right? Now they're going to start coming for it. Now they're going to start thinking about how to get it. Now they're going to start, really figuring out, okay, how do we actually attack this, and get some Bitcoin? You might not even be the relevant party in that. It's just, I got to get some Bitcoin, so how am I going to get it, right? These are really the threat vectors that I think about. I don't really worry about a state type thing. It's not really in my purview of concern, I guess. Who knows, it may happen, right? But these are the things that I think about. So what's really the strategy here, right? What's the strategy here, whether you've got stock or whether you've got IBIT, whether you've got MSTR, whether you've got Bitcoin in cold storage? What is the process here? Well, there's three real ways that I want you to start thinking about how to deal with a threat. And I'm not qualified, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a CPA, I'm not licensed in any way to give you advice on your specific situation. But I kind of want to just talk about some key things of how you should start thinking about how to hedge against these things, right? And there's, a three-pronged strategic approach that I like to take when I'm thinking about any of this, right? Estate planning, asset protection, whatever it is. And the first side of the three-stage triangle is jurisdiction. You've got to think about jurisdiction, right? Who has jurisdiction over dealing with any potential case that may come from here? So if you're doing business, right, what is the jurisdiction of that business? What is on the contracts that you sign? What is the prevailing courts? Then, or if you've got nation state, right, that's different, because once a nation state starts putting pressure on you, it's going to be a very, very different amount of pressure and attention that's coming your way, and you've got to be really ready for that. The next thing is banking. What type of banking partners do you have? What type of banking relationships do you have? Because generally speaking, if you're using, one of the vehicles that's been used for hundreds of years, like a trust, for example, or a foundation, then you're going to have banking partners, because how those entities work is that you need trustees to create separation between yourself and the entity that's holding the assets, right? So you're going to need banking partners, right? This is something that people are not thinking about, because they're thinking, oh, I have Bitcoin, I don't need bankers. Well, it's like, sure, you don't. But if you want long-term asset protection and you want long-term estate planning, you need banking partners, right? And the good news is there's great banks in the world, and those great banks have great incentives to help you keep your wealth. And so they have divisions for helping you do this, right? They have their own trust services divisions, they have their own wealth management divisions that help you do this. Now, the downside of this is most of you watching this are going to be too broke to actually get access to those conversations, and that's just an unfortunate fact of it, right? One of the advantages of Bitcoin is that content can be applicable to a lot of people. One of the disadvantages of having a lot of wealth is that services are only available to the extremely wealthy. So, there's like which ones can I do, which ones can't I do until my wealth gets high enough is a cause for concern. And the third thing is diversification. Because if you have jurisdiction covered, you have banking covered, the only threat is, okay, one penetrates it, right? One actually penetrates the defenses, and in that scenario, you need diversification. So maybe you hold your equities in one place, maybe you hold your spot Bitcoin and cold storage Bitcoin in another place, and then you have multiple sort of things that need to happen in order for that to be penetrated. And so, yeah, that's how it's very, very simple, but you must focus on it. I want every Bitcoiner, if you have more than one Bitcoin, you need to start thinking about this. You need to spend 30 days of the next quarter thinking about this, because there's no point getting to one Bitcoin if you don't end up with one Bitcoin in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, or, your grandchildren don't end up with that Bitcoin, right? And a lot of people are going to say, oh, this is too much to think about now. Why do I need to think about this right now? Because I don't, there's going to be wealthy people watching this get this, right? But for everybody else, I don't want you to imagine that of whatever your Bitcoin is worth today, right? Like if you're looking at one Bitcoin is worth 110,000, 111,000, whatever it is today, I don't want you to think about that. I want you to think about what it's going to be worth in 10 years, right? And then set up the protection now in order to hedge for the value of those assets in a decade, in 2 decades, in 3 decades, in 4 decades. That's how I want you to start thinking about this. Start thinking about your personal situation, because a lot of this depends on what jurisdiction you're in, right? It depends on what citizenships you have. It depends on what banking relationships you can get. It depends on a lot of different things. If you're an American, you're going to have different setups to if you're a Brit, for example, or you're a European citizen. But this is a very, very important way to think about it. Most people are very, very doing the happy hippie thing of going, everything's fine because I own Bitcoin. You don't realize there's 3 potential threat vectors that could be coming at you in any scenario, and they're only going to get more and more motivated as Bitcoin continues to become the rarest money that's ever been created. So think about those threat vectors, business, personal, state, and think about how to actually hedge those threat vectors, and that is through jurisdiction, banking, and diversification, and get to know, build the relationships. Even if you're not ready yet, let's say you've only got 1 Bitcoin. Some of this stuff takes $20,000 a year to set up. It's obviously not going to be worth it for you in that scenario. But start learning, start thinking about how you're going to do this when Bitcoin is $1 million a coin, when Bitcoin is, whatever it is, whatever it becomes. Start planning now, because they are going to come for your Bitcoin, and sitting there like a happy hippie moron saying that, oh yeah, I got Bitcoin, so therefore I don't need to worry about asset protection. That Bitcoin is going to be taken from you so smooth, you're not going to realize what hit you. They're just going to come and they're going to take it, because ultimately there's always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.